So this video and the notes that go along with it are on lesson 1.3, Origins of Complex Urban Societies in the Ancient World. So we've learned how at first we were hunters and gatherers, and then we eventually became more sedentary when we discovered how to domesticate both plants and animals. And so once people became more sedentary, they created villages, and those villages eventually became civilizations. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today, is how all of that started. So for this lesson on 1.3, we have three different sub-lessons. So the first is transition from a shifting to sedentary agriculture. The second is formation of hydraulic systems in early ancient Eurasian civilizations. And the third is the formation of American civilizations in the absence of any hydraulic system. So our learning goal is that we will be able to trace the transition from shifting cultivation, which is slash and burn, to sedentary agriculture, and the emergence of complex urban civilizations. So our essential questions are: how did sedentary agriculture lead to the emergence of these complex civilizations? Second, what were the causes and effects of the first urban civilizations? And then third, how did the formation of hydraulic systems affect the development of ancient civilizations? So our first sub-lesson is transition from shifting to sedentary agriculture. In many places in Afro-Eurasia, people combined farming with animal domestication. So farmers discovered that animal dung, that's animal poop, was effective for fertilizing fields. So no longer did farmers have to abandon their exhausted soils, which is what slash and burn agriculture is. That was on 1.2. So sedentary farms and communities began to form. Once they could grow crops on the same soil year after year after year, then these sedentary farms and communities began to develop. In the Americas, where they had very limited animal domestication, sedentarism, or being sedentary, occurred due to using decomposed vegetation, so think of like a compost, as fertilizer, and then also through terracing techniques that reinvigorated the soil with nutrients. Early Neolithic sedentary farming took place on hillsides or thin, sandy soils that could be easily manipulated using simple stone tools. That soil, that sandy, thin soil, was also very low in nutrients, so therefore it did not produce a lot of edible plants. So in early Neolithic society, there is no irrigation yet. So farmers are using dry farming techniques. For example, they are raking the soil, so bringing the soil from the bottom to the top to try and replenish those nutrients. And that was used to also help the soil to absorb the rainfall, because the topsoil would get very compact. Early Neolithic sedentary communities were organized through kinship and clans. So families tended to lived together, and then they had families, and so these early communities just spread, eventually growing to support hundreds of residents. So next we're going to look at formation of hydrologic systems in early Eurasian civilizations. And that word hydro means water. So we're looking at water systems. So the use of bronze tools and weapons and the emergence of social elites both contributed to the rise of civilizations in the Mesopotamian, the Nile, the Indus, and the Yellow River valleys. So this area in purple, that is the Nile River Valley. This area in orangey gold is the Mesopotamian River Valley. This area in pink is the Indus River Valley, and this area in yellow is the Yellow River Valley. So those are where four civilizations emerged separate from each other due to using bronze tools and weapons and having these social elites. So those bronze agricultural tools allowed the thicker and richer soils that are in the river valleys to be plowed. So remember, they used to just grow food on thin, sandy soil. So where the river, where the soil is next to the rivers, that is very thick, and so they needed these bronze tools, which are heavier and can dig through the soil easier in order to develop. So these soils also had higher nitrogen levels, which created higher agricultural yields. They were able to grow more crops. Since river valleys have rivers, river water could now be diverted from the river for irrigation, and that is what we mean when we think of hydraulic systems, so water systems. So some examples of water systems would be a canal or creating a dam. So military elites were skilled in the use of these expensive bronze weapons, and so they initiated and organized the creation of complex hydrologic systems like irrigation. So they collected tribute, they collected payment and labor in exchange for providing defense. So they provided defense for the civilization, and they also, again, then exchanged for labor. That coercive use of tribute labor created this hydrologic infrastructure on which civilizations were built. So here you see an underground water pipe and aqueduct in Pakistan, so around the Indus River Valley, and here you see Mesopotamian. This is a relief showing the importance of rivers for farming. And then here you have a type of irrigation or hydraulic system in Egypt. So the expansion of agricultural productivity in these areas created sustained agricultural surpluses, meaning we consistently had faith that we were going to grow food, and we had more food than we could use. And so that sustained agricultural surplus supported economic specialization, which are different jobs, and the creation of complex social hierarchies. We don't need everybody to be a farmer anymore. So we're going to have different jobs. We're going to have some people be craftsmen. They're going to make the pottery that we put the food in. We're going to have some people be merchants. So we have this social hierarchy where you have the super important people who are running everything on the top, and then the slaves and the peasants, which are the farmers, also on the bottom. Here is a relief from Mesopotamia. You can see this hierarchy. It's showing like the king or the leader on the top, and then people below are the workers. So our last sub-lesson is on formation of American civilizations in the absence of hydrologic systems. So in the Americas, and we're looking at Central America and South America, they did not use irrigation. They did not use hydrologic systems, but they also created civilizations, agricultural civilizations, pretty much simultaneous from those river civilizations in Afro-Eurasia. So that's what we're going to look at now. So in the Americas, the civilizations of the ancient Olmecs in eastern Mexico and the Shavin in the Andes arose through agricultural terracing and intercropping that produced high crop yields. So they're not using irrigation, they're using terracing, which we learned about in our geography unit. So that's making these sort of steps alongside of a mountain, and then also intercropping, growing multiple crops at the same time. So unlike in Afro-Eurasia, they did not use animal dung to grow their food. They did not use metal farming tools, nor did they use those complex hydrologic systems, those rivers, those dams, etc. So with the Olmecs, urban trading centers arose around monumental sacred sites. So the Olmecs, which are located right here, which is in eastern Mexico, this is where they located, and they traded long distance for obsidian, volcanic glass, so mountains are more up here in the mountain areas, volcanoes are more in the mountain areas. They traded for pottery and they traded for feathers. Where they traded, they also spread their cultural practices, such as ball games. This is an example of a ball court. Right here, you see the sacrifice from ball court. They also had religious practices. This is a temple complex. They drank chocolate, and they also wrote in glyphs. So these cultural practices then eventually influenced later civilizations, such as the Maya civilization. So this was the first civilization in Central America. Then we have the Shavin, and the Shavin developed in the Andes. So this is way before the Incas, and the Shavin that developed in the Andes had a large temple complex, and that eventually became the urban site. So the population developed around that urban temple complex, and then also became the center of craft making and trade. Hopefully this video has helped you with 1.3 and the notes that you will be using in class and on your midterm and on your final to help explain the development of these early civilizations.